Here's where I can see him now, officer. I'm reaching for my military ID.
Okay.
Slowly.
I don't care who you are. You people always got an excuse.
I hear what you just said.
Don't talk back. Step away from the vehicle.
I'm not a threat. I'm a United States Army major.
Drop it.
The first thing people heard was the gunshot. But the real story started 30 seconds earlier, when a black Army major stood under bright gas station lights with his hands raised, calmly telling a police officer he meant no harm, and the officer decided he didn't believe him. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you care about stories like this, real stories about justice, courage, and accountability, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. It helps us keep telling stories that matter. Now let's go back to that night. The gas station sat alone along a quiet highway outside Baltimore, its lights glowing like a small island in the darkness. It was late, almost midnight. The roads were mostly empty, and the air still carried the warmth from the long summer day. Major Ethan Cole, 38 years old, pulled his gray sedan into the station slowly. His fuel tank was almost empty, and he still had another 40 minutes before he would reach home. Ethan had spent most of his adult life serving in the United States Army. He had been deployed overseas more than once. He had commanded soldiers during missions where a single mistake could cost lives. But tonight, he was just a tired man trying to buy gas. He stepped out of the car and stretched his back. His hoodie hung loosely over dark jeans. His boots had seen more airports than most people ever would. Even in civilian clothes, his posture showed discipline. Straight back, calm eyes, measured movements. Inside the convenience store, the overnight clerk Anita Shah noticed him through the glass. She had worked the night shift long enough to recognize different types of customers. Some looked nervous. Some looked drunk. Some looked angry. Ethan looked none of those things. He simply inserted his card into pump 6 and waited while the machine began filling his tank. The quiet hum of gasoline flowing into the car was the loudest sound in the parking lot, until headlights suddenly cut across the darkness. A police cruiser rolled into the lot faster than necessary. The tires scraped the pavement as the vehicle stopped sharply behind Ethan's sedan, blocking the driver's door. Blue and red lights flashed across the gas station windows. Officer Travis Reed stepped out of the cruiser. He was in his early 40s, tall and broad-shouldered, the type of officer used to people becoming nervous the moment he approached. His hand rested near his holster as he walked toward Ethan. Not casually. Not professionally. But with the stiff posture of someone who had already decided something was wrong. Ethan noticed the cruiser immediately. He slowly turned his body, raising one hand slightly in a peaceful gesture. "Evening, officer," he said calmly. Reed didn't respond. His eyes scanned Ethan up and down like he was already searching for proof of a crime. "Step away from the vehicle," Reed said sharply. Ethan blinked once. "I'm just pumping gas." "I said step away from the vehicle," Reed snapped. "Hands where I can see them." Ethan's hands were already visible. Still, he lifted them higher. "My hands are visible," he said calmly. "Is there a problem?" Reed stepped closer. "You match the description of someone suspicious in the area." Ethan glanced around the nearly empty gas station. "A suspicious person doing what?" "Don't ask questions," Reed replied. "Just follow instructions." Ethan stayed calm. "I'm happy to cooperate, officer. I just want to understand what's happening." That sentence alone irritated Reed. His jaw tightened. "You got an attitude?" he asked. "No, sir," Ethan said. He kept his voice slow and respectful. "I'm only asking why I'm being stopped." Reed moved closer again until they stood only a few feet apart. "Turn around." Ethan paused for half a second. Not refusing. Just thinking. "Am I being detained?" he asked calmly. That question made Reed's expression change instantly. Turn around, Reed repeated, louder this time. Ethan slowly turned his back. His hands remained raised in the air. The officer grabbed Ethan's wrists suddenly and twisted it behind his back. The force surprised him. His shoulder moved slightly as he tried to keep his balance. "Stop resisting," Reed shouted. Ethan spoke louder so anyone nearby could hear. "I'm not resisting." Inside the store, Anita felt a knot forming in her stomach. Through the glass window, she could clearly see Ethan's hands still raised. Nothing about this situation looked like resistance. It looked like someone trying very hard not to make a wrong move. Ethan tried to end the situation quickly. "Officer," he said carefully, "my wallet is in my back pocket. My ID is there. Tell me how you want me to move and I'll do it." That single word changed everything. Wallet. Reed's hand moved instantly toward his gun. "Don't reach," the officer snapped. "I'm not reaching," Ethan replied. "I'm informing you." The officer's eyes hardened. Then he muttered something under his breath. "You people always got an excuse." Ethan froze. His jaw tightened slightly. "Repeat that," he said quietly. Reed's face flushed, realizing he had spoken out loud. Instead of backing down, he grew angrier. "Don't talk back." Ethan took a slow breath. "Officer, I'm not a threat," he said calmly. "I'm a major in the United States Army." For a brief second, silence filled the gas station. Ethan hoped the words would reset the situation. They didn't. "I don't care what you are," Reed replied coldly. Then he barked another order. "Get on the ground." Ethan hesitated. The command didn't make sense. To get on the ground, he would have to lower his hands. And Reed had just ordered him to keep them raised. "Hands where I can see them," Reed shouted again. Ethan spoke slowly, trying to avoid sudden movement. "My hands are up. I'm going to reach for my military ID slowly." Reed's hand gripped his weapon. "Drop it." "I haven't moved yet," Ethan replied. The next moment happened faster than anyone expected. A gunshot exploded through the quiet night. Ethan's body jerked violently. Then he collapsed beside Pump 6, his hands still empty. For a few seconds, no one moved. Officer Reed stood frozen, gun still pointed. Inside the store, Anita screamed. Outside, a man near the ice freezer dropped his drink in shock. Then Reed grabbed his radio. "Shots fired," he said quickly. "Suspect down." The word suspect hung in the air like poison. Anita ran outside, but kept her distance, her hands raised in fear. "He's bleeding," she shouted. "Call an ambulance." "What did you do?" Reed turned toward her. "Get back inside." But Anita didn't move. She had already pulled out her phone. And the next call she made would become the reason the truth survived. The sirens were already on their way. But what the officer didn't know yet was that 3 different cameras had just recorded everything. And the moment investigators watched those recordings, the entire story would begin to fall apart. The ambulance arrived in less than 6 minutes, but for Major Ethan Cole, those 6 minutes felt like an entire lifetime slipping away. He lay on the cold concrete beside Pump 6, blood spreading beneath him, while the gas pump continued clicking mechanically as if nothing had happened. The bright lights above the station illuminated everything: the shocked faces, the flashing patrol car lights, and the officer who had just fired his weapon. Officer Travis Reed paced beside his cruiser, still gripping his radio. Suspect reached for something. He repeated into the dispatcher, "I feared for my life." But the problem for Reed was simple. 3 different people had just seen what actually happened. And one of them had already recorded it. Inside the convenience store, Anita Shah stood near the entrance with her phone shaking in her hands. Her 911 call had turned into something else entirely: audio evidence. Her voice trembled as she spoke into the phone. He didn't do anything, she said loudly. The man had his hands up the whole time. Outside, Ethan struggled to breathe. The bullet had struck his upper chest, missing his heart by inches but tearing through muscle and bone. A paramedic named Lucas Grant jumped out of the ambulance with his partner the moment they arrived. They rushed to Ethan's side. "Stay with us," Lucas said while pressing gauze against the wound. "Can you hear me?" Ethan nodded weakly. His voice was barely a whisper. "My kids. You're going to see them again," Lucas replied firmly. "But you have to stay awake." Another paramedic quickly searched Ethan's pockets for identification. The moment the wallet opened, Lucas froze. He pulled out a card and stared at it. Then he looked up at Officer Reed. "This man is a major in the United States Army," Lucas said loudly. The sentence changed the atmosphere instantly. Reed stopped pacing. For the first time since the shooting, uncertainty crossed his face. Lucas held up the military ID. "Major Ethan Cole," he repeated. Several bystanders who had gathered near the edge of the lot exchanged shocked looks. A decorated military officer had just been shot at a gas station. Within seconds, Ethan was lifted onto the stretcher and rushed into the ambulance. The doors slammed shut, and the vehicle sped away toward Johns Hopkins Hospital. Officer Reed remained behind, trying to regain control of the situation. But control was already slipping. Because inside the gas station, Anita had done something crucial. She had saved the recording. The hospital waiting room felt cold and quiet when Ethan's wife arrived. Sophia Cole rushed through the doors with their 2 children after receiving a terrifying phone call from a military officer. "Your husband has been shot." Those were the only words she remembered clearly. Their 10-year-old son Jordan held tightly to her hand. "Mom, is Dad going to die?" he asked softly. Sophia didn't answer. She simply hugged him closer. Their younger daughter Amara sat silently beside them, staring at the floor without speaking. Hours passed before a surgeon finally walked into the waiting room. "He survived the surgery," the doctor said. Sophia collapsed into tears of relief. The bullet had missed Ethan's heart and lungs by a narrow margin. Another inch in either direction, and the outcome would have been very different. But survival didn't mean the nightmare was over. Because while Ethan fought to recover in a hospital bed, Officer Reed was already writing his official report. At the police station, Reed typed quickly. His report was short, direct, and carefully worded. Suspect failed to comply. Suspect reached suddenly toward his waistband. Officer feared for his life and discharged weapon. To someone reading only the report, the shooting sounded justified. But reports are just stories written by people. Evidence tells the truth. And the truth was already being reviewed. 2 detectives from Internal Affairs sat inside a small room watching the gas station surveillance footage. The screen showed Ethan standing calmly beside his car. Hands up. No aggressive movement. No sudden reach. Just a man trying to explain himself. Then the detectives heard something else through the audio file Anita had provided. "You people always got an excuse." The room went silent. One detective leaned back slowly in his chair. "That's not going to look good in court," he said quietly. But the footage didn't stop there. It showed Ethan clearly announcing his movement before reaching. "I'm reaching for my military ID slowly." The detectives replayed the video again. And again. Each time the same fact became clearer. Ethan had followed instructions. Reed had escalated the situation. The final clip showed the gunshot. Ethan falling. Hands empty. One detective sighed heavily. "This is bad," he muttered. The next afternoon, the police chief held a press conference outside the department headquarters. Microphones crowded the podium. News cameras were everywhere. The chief spoke carefully. "An officer-involved shooting occurred last night," he said. "The department has opened a full investigation. But reporters were already asking harder questions. Is it true the victim is an Army major? Was there body camera footage? Did the officer make racial comments? The chief avoided direct answers. But by evening, the story had exploded across the country. Veterans groups began sharing Ethan's story online. Local residents gathered at the gas station holding candles. The quiet parking lot where the shooting happened had suddenly become a symbol. People stood silently under the same lights where Ethan had fallen. One man held a sign that read, "He served his country." The next morning, Internal Affairs made their first move. Officer Travis Reed was placed on administrative leave. But the investigation was only beginning. Detectives began reviewing Reed's history inside the department. What they found surprised no one who had worked with him. There were complaints. Several of them. Most had been dismissed quietly over the years. Unnecessary force. Aggressive stops. Disrespect toward civilians. None had resulted in serious discipline. But now those complaints looked very different. Because investigators also uncovered something else. Reed had been part of a private messaging group with a few other officers. Some of the messages included jokes and comments about teaching certain people respect. Nothing openly illegal, but the tone was clear. The mindset was there. When prosecutors received the full investigation file, they knew the case would be strong. Because this wasn't just about a shooting anymore. It was about abuse of power. Within 3 weeks, a grand jury reviewed the evidence. Video footage. Witness testimony. Medical reports. Officer Reed's own statements. The decision came quickly. The grand jury issued a formal indictment. Attempted murder. Aggravated assault. Civil rights violations under color of law. Officer Travis Reed was arrested the next morning. For the first time in 20 years of wearing a badge, he stood on the other side of handcuffs. The booking photo taken that day showed a very different man from the one who had walked into the gas station with swagger. But the real confrontation was still coming. Because months later, inside a packed courtroom, Major Ethan Cole would finally face the man who shot him, and when the jury saw the footage, the outcome of the trial would shock the entire country. 9 months after the shooting, the courtroom in Baltimore was packed long before the trial even began. People filled every seat. Veterans in uniform. Reporters with notebooks. Local residents who had followed the story from the beginning. Everyone wanted to see what would happen when Major Ethan Cole finally faced the man who shot him. Officer Travis Reed sat at the defense table wearing a dark suit that made him look uncomfortable. Without the police uniform, he seemed smaller somehow. His shoulders were stiff, and his eyes avoided the crowd. Across the room, Ethan entered slowly. He walked with a slight limp. The bullet wound had healed, but the damage to his muscles meant recovery would take years. Still, his posture remained strong. Disciplined. Controlled. When Ethan sat beside his wife Sophia, their children were not in the courtroom. The family had decided they were too young to watch the trial. At exactly 9:00 a.m., the judge entered. Everyone stood. The trial had officially begun. The prosecution wasted no time presenting the case. The lead prosecutor, Attorney Laura Bennett, walked toward the jury with a calm but firm tone. This case, she began, is about power and responsibility. She pointed toward Officer Reed. A man trusted with authority used that power recklessly, and a citizen who followed every instruction was nearly killed. Then she showed the first piece of evidence. The gas station surveillance footage. The courtroom fell silent as the video played. The screen showed Ethan standing beside his car. Hands raised. Calm. Compliant. The jurors leaned forward in their seats. The video continued. Officer Reed shouting commands. Ethan trying to respond respectfully. Then the audio recording from Anita Shah's phone played through the speakers. You people always got an excuse. Several jurors exchanged glances. Then the final moment arrived. The gunshot. Ethan collapsing to the pavement. One juror covered her mouth in shock. Attorney Bennett paused the video. Ladies and gentlemen, she said quietly, did you see a threat? No one spoke. But the answer was already obvious. The defense attorney tried to reshape the narrative. He argued that police officers must make split-second decisions. He said Reed believed Ethan might have been reaching for a weapon. Officer Reed feared for his life, the attorney told the jury. But the prosecution dismantled that argument piece by piece. First came the medical testimony. The doctor who treated Ethan explained how the bullet entered his body from an angle that matched the video evidence. Ethan had not turned aggressively. He had not lunged. He had simply been standing still. Then Anita Shah took the stand. She looked nervous as she spoke, but her voice remained clear. I watched everything through the window, she said. That man had his hands up the whole time. The defense tried to question her memory. But the prosecutor played the recording from her phone again. Her voice during the 911 call was loud and desperate. He didn't do anything, she had shouted. The recording matched her testimony exactly. The jury listened carefully. Then the prosecution delivered its final blow. They presented Officer Reed's private messages from the group chat investigators had discovered. The messages contained jokes about teaching certain people respect. Attorney Bennett turned toward the jury again. Bias doesn't always shout, she said. Sometimes it whispers. The courtroom remained silent. But the damage to Reed's defense had already been done. When Major Ethan Cole finally took the witness stand, the room felt heavy. He spoke slowly and calmly, just like he had at the gas station. I followed every instruction, Ethan said. I raised my hands. I explained every movement. Then he looked directly toward Reed. I even told him I was reaching slowly for my military ID. The prosecutor asked one final question. Major Cole, why did you tell the officer your rank? Ethan answered honestly. I thought it might remind him that I was someone who respected discipline. The courtroom stayed silent for several seconds. Then the judge called for a recess. Closing arguments came 2 days later. The defense repeated its claim that Reed had acted out of fear. But the prosecution focused on the evidence. Video, audio, witnesses, and Reed's own words. This was not fear, Attorney Bennett told the jury. This was prejudice backed by a gun. The jury left the courtroom to deliberate. Those 2 days felt endless. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited for updates. Inside, Ethan and his family sat quietly in a private room. Finally, on the third afternoon, the jury returned. Everyone stood as they filed into the courtroom. The judge looked toward the jury foreperson. Has the jury reached a verdict? Yes, Your Honor. The clerk read the decision. On the charge of attempted murder, the room held its breath. We find the defendant guilty. A quiet gasp moved through the crowd. The clerk continued reading. Aggravated assault, guilty. Civil rights violation under color of law, guilty. Every major charge, guilty. Officer Reed sat frozen as the verdict echoed through the courtroom. Justice had finally caught up with him. 6 weeks later, the courtroom filled again for sentencing. Major Ethan Cole stood before the judge to give his victim's statement. He spoke calmly, but every word carried weight. My children now flinch when they hear police sirens, he said. My daughter asked me if officers are supposed to shoot people who listen to them. Several people in the courtroom wiped away tears. Then Ethan said something that made the entire room fall silent. I served my country in war zones, but the most dangerous moment of my life happened at a gas station in my own country. The judge nodded slowly. Then he turned toward Officer Reed. You were trusted with power, the judge said, and you used it as a weapon. The courtroom held its breath. Therefore, this court sentences you to 25 years in state prison. The gavel struck. The sound echoed through the room. Officer Travis Reed was immediately handcuffed and escorted out. The same man who once carried a badge now walked away as a convicted felon. In the months that followed, the police department announced new reforms. Mandatory de-escalation training. Earlier body camera activation. Stronger reviews for officer complaints. Some people praised the changes. Others asked why it took a near-fatal shooting for those reforms to happen. Major Ethan Cole eventually returned to limited duty with the United States Army. He never sought fame, but he did begin speaking publicly about discipline, accountability, and knowing your rights, because he understood something important. Justice in his case happened because evidence existed, because a witness spoke up, because cameras captured the truth before it could be rewritten. Not every victim gets that chance. And that reality still hangs over stories like this. So here's the question that remains. If there had been no cameras, if Anida Shah had stayed silent, would the outcome have been the same? Or would the world have simply believed the report that said, "Suspect reached suddenly"? Sometimes justice depends on people refusing to look away. And on one quiet night at a gas station, that refusal changed everything.